Hello and welcome to More Than Mondays, a podcast for believers by believers to challenge, encourage, and shift our perspective as we begin our week together. In this week's episode, we have my friend Hope Moquin talking to us about transitions. I hope you enjoy this conversation.
Hey, everybody. So excited for this week's guest. My friend Hope Moquin is on with us today on More Than Mondays. It is truly such a privilege to have you on this call with me on this podcast today. And just meeting you and getting to know you through Instagram and just conversing about the things that you post and how awesome they are and the things that you conversely thought about me. Nobody really knows why you thought they were cool things that I posted, but I appreciate it. It got this connection, and I'm really excited about this conversation because I know that you have a lot to give in this area of transition. So thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, for sure. I'm super excited. Been following you for about a year now. And so I think you post great content. I found your podcast probably about 6 months ago, listened to some of it. So super honored to be here and I'm excited.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it, Hope. And I'm really excited about this topic today. This topic is something that I feel like for me personally, I've been in for, oh gosh, like a year and a half, almost 2 years. But today we're gonna talk about transitions. But before we jump into that, I want you to share a little bit more about who you are.
Yeah, for sure. Right now, I live in Atlanta. Well, I don't live in Atlanta. I live about 40 minutes north of Atlanta. I'm at Free Chapel. I'm one of the directors for Free Chapel College. And so I oversee all student life there, discipleship, retreats, all that good stuff. And then on the side, I do blogging. I'm an author. And so I just try to use my influence the best that I can with the girls who follow me on social media. And so those are my really two main things that consume my whole life. And so I've been at the church for 5 years now, and been doing blogging for about four. And so that's really, really who I am.
That's really awesome. And I do, again, like I said, even though you do lean more towards women on your post, I think your posts are so key because you talk about identity. And I think a lot of Christians don't really hear much about identity. They're like, oh, I'm a new creation because I've been saved. But then that's like the end of it. They don't understand what that actually entails and what that means. And so I love that you do that. I love that you blog. I actually haven't read your book yet, but I did just get it in the mail. I am excited to read it and see what it's all about. And I don't know the subtitle, but it's the second table, right?
Right. Yeah. The subtitle is Where Compromise Isn't an Option and Honesty is a Non Negotiable. And so that's kind of what I try to do with my influence on social media, for sure about identity, because I feel like people hear Christianity and Jesus and they think it's all like rainbows and sunshine, or they think it's like all legalistic. And so I just try my best to communicate it in a way that's gracious, where people understand the true heart of God, where it's not like all crazy and rules and everything, but it's really
Yeah.
love and it's grace. And so that's my main goal.
I love that. And it's literally my heart as well. Like, I want people to see the reality of Christianity. It's not a set of rules and regulations. And honestly, it's not this rainbow and butterfly adventure that you get to go on. You're not on My Little Pony where like the thing that goes wrong is just tiny little thing. It's like your life can drastically shift, it can change, it can break, things can happen to you. And I would argue, and maybe you agree, maybe you won't, but I would argue when we get into Christianity, we get hit harder than ever before. And so being real and being vulnerable is so important. And I love that about you and your content. And it actually has inspired me to start a blog and do this, or restart my blog and do the same. And so I really appreciate that. You've encouraged me in a lot of areas, in some areas you don't even know. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Hope. But let's dive into it. Let's dive into the transitions. And we're talking about rainbows, butterflies, or legalism. Like, transitions, I feel like, are one of the hardest parts of Christianity. So for you personally, what has been the hardest part of any transition that you've gone through yourself, or since you are a college director, maybe somebody that you've had to walk through transitions with?
Yeah, for sure. I think transition is so scary because it involves so many different things. It involves leaving what you're comfortable, it's going to new territory, it's learning new things, it's unlearning a lot of things. And so it's like just this whole realm of complete newness, and it takes a lot of discipline and dedication to go through with it. And so for transition with me, that was probably when I left Florida to move up to Georgia to attend Free Chapel College the first year. That was
Mhm.
crazy. That was me moving out by myself for the first time. That was me leaving the school that I got saved at. And like, I'm a huge loyalist. And so it's like, oh, I can't leave people where they were the ones who introduced me to the Lord. And so to like leave them and then move to a whole new state with all these people at the same church that I got kicked out of 5, 6 years ago, it's like, this doesn't make sense. And so that was just incredibly hard to leave what I knew and what I got first introduced to the Lord and go into like somewhere new where I hadn't been before. It's like, I don't want to go. It's scary.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think transitions are like a this weird combo of scary and exciting, with a lot more scary than exciting. Like when they first start, you're like very excited about it. You're like, oh yeah, something new's coming. And then like a day later, for the rest of the transition, you're just terrified. At least that's how it goes for me.
For sure. For sure.
um, so with that being said, like how do you handle transitions, especially let's say like when something's moving a little bit slower than you'd like for it to go? Because let's be honest, that's kind of how life operates. God works on his timeline, not on ours.
Oh my gosh, for sure. I feel like humanity is just like always wanting to press the fast forward button all the time, and nobody wants to endure a process. And I think that's why leaders fall so quickly sometimes, is because they
Mm,
do try to speed through the process, and no one's willing to slow down and actually
yeah,
go to the steps that the Lord's wanting them to take, because it's in the process that you get all of the things that you need when you get to the promise. And if you speed through the process, then when you do get to the promise, then you're not going to have what you need to sustain the promise. And that's been like the biggest thing, because I am impatient as nobody's business. If I know that I want something, then like I want it now. And
yeah,
the Lord has really had to stop me in my tracks and go through a lot of pain and heartache, not because he's mad at me or because he like hates me, but he had to discipline me and make me slow down because he loves me. And so transition, it's like you can't speed something up that's on God's timing. And you really, I mean, you can slow it down with your disobedience, but you can't speed it up. And the best imagery that like I've ever been told, I think Craig Groeschel used it. It's like when a woman is pregnant and she's giving birth, it's like there is nothing you can do to speed up that process. But when the time is right, there's nothing you can do to stop that baby from coming out either. And that's kind of like the
yeah,
same thing with the promises of God. Like when you're in transition, it's like you can't speed it up, but when the time is right, it's like there's nothing you can do from God's perfect will unfolding. And so we just have to be faithful and trust that he knows what he's doing. I mean, he's the one who put life in our lungs. And so it's like, why not trust that he knows what he's doing, you know?
yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And one thing that I really got challenged with something that was happening in my life recently, with an opportunity to get into the ministry full time, was um, God really kind of challenged me with what he challenged Moses with in the wilderness, where he said, you can go into the promised land and I'll send an angel before you, but I'm not going with you. Like you'll be successful still. I'll still take care of you, but my presence won't be in it. And it was giving me the promise, but without the promise maker. And I'm going to be honest, if this was a year ago today, I probably would have taken that opportunity. But through the long transition, like I said, the year and a half that I've been going through this, I've realized I would much rather stay in the wilderness of transition with God. I know these are super Christian terms, but I'd rather stay in the places of uncertainty, or where's my next meal going to come from, how am I going to pay my bills, whatever that looks like. If God is there, then I would step into whatever he's promised me. If he's just going to send an angel with me, he that's the crazy part to me. Like he will still allow you to be successful, like you were saying, in the promise, but you're not going to have everything you need. And sometimes we miss out on the depth of relationship with God that we need to step into these new places and these new spaces in transition. That's really good. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, for sure. That like reminds me, it's like someone once told me, it's whenever we are so persistent to create something with our own human hands, whatever we create with our human hands, we have to sustain with our own human hands. And
Mm,
we are not that smart. We do not know everything. And so if we think that we're smart enough to create something, then we have to be smart enough to sustain it. And I'm
yeah.
so with you. I know it's a Christian term, but it's like, no, I would rather be in this wilderness and wait for the Lord, because then the
Yes.
Lord, he can sustain it. And I can just say, yes, God, keep on going. I'm on your train.
Yeah, that's so good. I think you kind of reminded me of a quote that I started to kind of live by. A wise man knows how much he doesn't know. It
Yeah.
it like can cause you to pause, because when you think you know something, if you're truly wise, you go, okay, I want to triple check, quadruple check, make sure that God is actually moving in this, because ultimately He is where all wisdom comes from. But we kind of hit on this when we talked about transition, and you can slow down your transition with disobedience. You can step into a promise too soon, and it can fall apart. Would you mind maybe explaining one of those moments that maybe that you've walked through with somebody, or you've walked through yourself, where you were in a transition moment and you either extended it and caused yourself pain because of disobedience, or you stepped into it and kind of was like, "Ooh, I'm not supposed to be here yet," and maybe had to pull back and step back into where God wanted you.
For sure. I think transition falls into so many different life categories. And
Yeah.
one of my biggest areas of probably disobedience has been in relationships, like
Hmm.
intimate relationships. And this was 2 or 3 years ago. I don't even know my timetable. But I was in a relationship and the guy was great and there wasn't anything wrong. But it was like one of those things, it's like, is it good or is it God? And I knew that it wasn't God. But because of the image that it held and because of the direction my life was moving in, it's like, I'm going to keep on trying to make it work. And so then it got to the point where I got engaged and it was still that unwavering dis-peace in my spirit. And I was like, oh no. So then I had to finally just like get myself to a place where I was going to be like, okay, God, I'm going to be obedient. So I had to break off an engagement 3 months before the wedding just because of my simple disobedience. And it's like, if I
Hmm.
would have been obedient to God within like the first few months of the relationship, or even before it even started, I would have saved myself so much heartache, so much perception from like the people who are watching me lead just because of my sole disobedience. And it's like I knew I was being disobedient. And so it's like if I would have just slowed down, got over myself, went humble before the Lord, it's like, Lord, help me to be obedient and get out of this. I could have skipped a whole process of getting engaged, breaking it off, and hurting a lot of people in the process of it. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, just be obedient.
Just be obedient. I love that. And there is another side of that same coin, because I feel like you're not the only person that has maybe not that exact story, but a similar story where, like, for me, I recently went to California for 2 months, and I felt like it was right. I felt like that was where I was supposed to be. And now, like, looking back on it, God in His grace and His mercy allowed me to do it. And I feel like I maybe have slowed some things down in my process, potentially because I transitioned maybe a little sooner than I should have. But with time, distance, and reflection, I will know a little bit more. But when we do these things and we make these mistakes, what is something that you would give an encouragement, like having walked through that situation and now you're on the other side of it, and maybe somebody listening is going through a very similar situation, disobedience? What encouragement would you give them now in this moment to continue pressing, not be ashamed of making that mistake, and continue following Jesus in obedience now?
For sure. This statement changed my life because my friend got in my face and shoved this in me. And they looked at me dead in the eyes and they said, your ministry deserves this breakup. And like, I know people can hear that and it's like, oh, well, that means breaking up with this person or this engagement. And it's like, yes, that can follow in that. But it also means breaking up with habits, breaking up with friendships, breaking up with thought patterns. And so, like, whatever is like hindering you, the person that you're going to be one day, the person who you're going to be with one day, and whatever job you're going to hold, that all deserves for you to break up with anything that will hinder you to get there. And it's like, it's not a shameful thing. Like, we're all human. You can't escape your humanity. And so it's like, it's not a matter of if you fall. It's even Paul says it, I think. He says, like, when you fall, just get back up. You keep moving forward with it. And so my encouragement is like, yeah, like you might have dislonged something or like kept on being something that you shouldn't be, but it's like, whatever, you're human, get back up and just be obedient, because everyone on the other side of this, they're deserving of you to be obedient, and we should care about that.
That's so good. And it's one of my favorite proverbs too. I say it's one of my favorite, and then I can't even tell you where it's in the Proverbs. There's 31 chapters, you can find it. But it says the righteous man falls 7 times. That number 7 is actually the biblical number 7 for perfection or completion. So it's talking about the righteous person who makes the mistake or has the complete quote unquote failure, or it could be moral, it could be disobedience, it could be whatever. And the rest of that proverb is, but rises again. It's not about whether or not you fall. It's about your response when you do fall, because we all fall short. It's just the reality. But how, it's so good that you pointed to that. It's like, how do you respond?
Mm-hmm.
You deserve the people that you're influencing, the people that you're touching. You may not feel like you're influencing anybody, but I read a statistic the other day that the average person influences 70,000 people within their life. And that could be positive or negative.
Right.
And so everything you do, and this is not pressure, this, I don't want you to feel like, oh, I have to be perfect. You don't have to be perfect, but you do have to remember that your life is impacting people. And so your responses to things do matter more than just your moment of pleasure, your moment of desire, your moment of whatever. It's impacting more people than you can even imagine. And so don't be ashamed of making a mistake. I think that's one thing I love about you, Hope, is you own and have owned your mistake. I listened to the podcast on her. Like, you own your testimony so well. You own anything you've done, and through our conversations, you shared some stuff with me that, you're just like, I want people to see this so that they can see two things and this is now my opinion. They can see two things. They can see, one, that God is going to use who he's going to use. And it doesn't matter where you think you've gone wrong, or where you've maybe, before you met Jesus, or whatever it looks like. And then two, it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to be open with people. And you have just crushed that. And it's been awesome. So I appreciate that. And transitions are hard. They're not easy. So when we're in the midst of transition, just keep your head up, keep grinding, and keep pursuing. But I do have another question for you. Now, this is one that I know I struggle with. I posted about it the other day on my Instagram, because it has been, I have to remind myself every day. I feel like the words, I always tell myself, don't go back to Egypt. Don't go back to Egypt. So how do you, Hope, combat the desire to return to your comfort of the past season when you're faced with the difficulties of the upcoming season you're stepping into?
That is one of my biggest struggles, because I feel like everyone likes to be comfortable and no one likes to be uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, not to throw like a Christian twist on it, but like, if you can really just ask Lord to give you a true revelation of who he is, then you're going to understand that he is a God of new beginnings, that he's always wanting to do something new. And he's not like locked in a box to always move in one way, because he moved in that kind of way before. And so it's
That's
like,
good.
if we're always running back to the old miracles or like the old things that he's done, then it's like we're putting a limit on God and like what he can do in our life. And for me, in my life, where I want to go, it's like, I don't want a life of limitations. I don't want a life where like I'm in a box. And so therefore I can't keep looking over my shoulder to see what God is doing back there. But I think that we should always glance back to remember what God has done. But I don't think we should ever like be in this like pool of like always trying to go back and look at God from the past. It's like, read your Bible. Like, he's always doing something new. He wants to do something new. And so for me, I have to remember that anytime that the Lord has done something huge in my life, or anything in like my students' life, it's because they chose to get uncomfortable and they chose to take the step out on the water into the unfamiliarity, out of the wilderness, and the Lord blessed it. And like, it might be painful and it might be hard a little bit, but uncomfortable areas is where you grow. I think that's just a
Yeah,
choice you have to make. It's like, do I want to be comfortable or do I want to grow? And like, that's really all there is to it.
that's really good. That's really good. Do you want to be uncomfortable, or do you want to grow?
Yeah.
Or do you want to be comfortable, or do you want to grow? That's so good. And you touched on, again, I probably could say a lot of favorite verses, but this is one of my favorites to explain to people, is in Isaiah, I think 43, where the Lord reminds the children of Israel, I made the way through the Red Sea. Like, I did these things, but forget the former things. What he's doing is he's reminding us of his goodness, but he's saying, but don't expect me to move that same way. And so I think that that's so good for you to have shared with us, like, because I know from time to time, I look for God to move the way he moved before,
Right.
but he doesn't. And that's a good, like, he doesn't, his character doesn't change, his goodness doesn't change, but he is like is a God of glory. Like he wants to do big things in our lives where there's no question that it's him, but he doesn't want to do the same big things in our lives. He wants to change it. He wants to show off in the best of ways. Like, and so I think that it's so important for us to understand, like, as God brings us into new seasons in new places, we've become the person that we're supposed to be to step into that season. And like, I think like I'm getting this picture right now, but we're like the baby version of what we're going to be at the end of that season. So of course there's going to be things that are hard for us to do at the beginning of a new season, that by the end of that season, when we're about to transition out, we're like, this was a cakewalk, and it's our new comfort zone because we've grown, we've developed, and man, that is so good, Hope. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And what I love to do to close these out, it can be about anything. It doesn't have to be about our topic, but I love to give you the floor for just 2 minutes straight of whatever encouragement you feel like you want to share with anybody who's listening to the podcast.
Yeah, I'll touch on honesty and vulnerability. If I can encourage anybody to be honest from where they've been and what they're even going through now, regardless if you're in leadership or anything like that, it's like be honest with the people under you and around you, because if we ever try to put on this like perfect perception of our lives and like we're claiming to be Christians, what that does is it puts a false reality on the people looking at us, because they look at us and they see us portraying this Jesus. And so if they're looking at these people who are portraying these perfect lives, then they're expecting that when they go to follow the Lord, then their lives are going to be perfect. And then when stuff does happen, they're going to be like, what the heck is going on? Like this person, their life is perfect. So like my life should be perfect. And so really when we're putting on this perfection facade, we are doing a disservice to the people who are looking at us, because we're giving them a false reality, and like that's not okay. So it's like,
Yeah.
as much as you can be honest and vulnerable, you're just opening up the door for people to step into freedom a lot more than you realize. And so regardless of what you think people are judging you with or looking at you with, I promise that you're just giving people the option to look at you and say me too. And that's what we're here to do, is to say me too and to point them up to the Lord. And so honesty and vulnerability goes a long way, and it's actually a necessity in Christianity.
Wow, that's really powerful, and it's so true. Again, thank you so much, Hope, for joining us on More Than Mondays this week. It's been such a privilege. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Of course.
Thank you for listening to More Than Mondays. I hope this podcast encouraged you, challenged you, and shifted your perspective as we start this week together. Look for our new episodes every Monday at 8 a.m. God bless.